I would like to welcome everyone back to another episode of the OurView Podcast. This is the first episode of season 4. I really can't believe I have recorded 67 episodes in the last year and a half. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for sharing the podcast and just for your comments of support and love. I truly appreciate it. This episode here, as I said, is the first episode of season 4. It won't be a long episode. It's just going to be a brief recap of 2021 for the podcast and for my personal self, my personal life, I should say. I will also take this time to share with you what to expect from the podcast in this season 4. So, as I mentioned, over the first 3 seasons, I have had 67 episodes that were put out into the podcast world. We have 4,985 downloads of the podcast. Let's see if we can get that to 5,000 by February. I know we can do it. In season 3, it was a shorter season than season 2 was, but we had great topics. We continued with our Mental Health Monday, and we had some great guests. We started off with Francesco Clark, the owner of Clark's Botanical Skincare line, who has a spinal cord injury. And then something that I would say was a little different. We stepped out and we talked about accessible and affordable housing for those who have disabilities with Tammy McSweeney Pettiford. And I wanted to make sure that we had that conversation, especially last season, because people with disabilities do live on their own. And there are ways that we can live independently. So I wanted to make sure that we started that conversation, and I'm hoping to continue that conversation sometime this season with Tammy and some other people who are knowledgeable in the affordable and accessible housing world. We also address topics related to disabilities and technology with Adriana Malozzi. We had a great game of Allegoria, which is a game of human connection with Nathan Todd, Dr. Michelle Finan, and Alina Grenier. That was one of my favorite episodes to listen to. I wasn't actually a part of that episode, but make sure, if you haven't, make sure you listen to that episode. It's really great. Again, it's about human connection and the importance of making connections with others is so important for all of us during this time of being in the pandemic. And some of us, especially some of us with people with disabilities, being isolated from other people as this virus has disproportionately impacted the lives of those who have disabilities. So, maintaining human connection during this time is important for all of us. We then talked about, we ended the season with a conversation on diversity, equity, and inclusion with Katerina Rivera. And again, another great conversation that is much needed. And we often forget about to talk about disabilities when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Disability is often the forgotten topic, and I was happy to have that conversation with her. And then, so a few things of what you can expect from the podcast this season. Um, Again, I will be giving a recap of my year of 2021, what it was like living another year in a pandemic, living by myself. I celebrated my 40th birthday, what that was like. I took a trip of a lifetime to Disney World. And I will actually be having 2 guests on to share their experience as wheelchair users in Disney World. We will talk about the accessibility or the inaccessibility of all of the parks there in Florida. And more specifically, I think I am going to lean more towards specific topics each month. For instance, for March is Multiple Sclerosis Awareness Month. So I want to focus on that diagnosis. As I've tried to stress in previous episodes of the podcast, although you may know 10 people who have multiple sclerosis, it impacts each one differently. Every individual is impacted different. They have different side effects from the diagnosis. So I want to highlight that during the month of March. April is Autism Awareness Month or Autism Acceptance Month. So the topics on the podcast will be geared towards autism during the month of April. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I definitely plan on continuing the once a month Mental Health Monday episodes here on the podcast. And specifically during the month of May, I will be highlighting topics related to mental health to acknowledge Mental Health Awareness Month. And I can officially confirm that perhaps the most exciting news for season 4 is that the most requested guest for the podcast will be making an appearance. No, it's not Patti LaBelle. She's my most requested guest. But the guest that is most requested by other people, Dolores, my mother, she will be making an appearance on the podcast this season for a Mother's Day episode. The content we have scheduled for this season 4 will, as always, be informative, educational, and most importantly, necessary to share with you all. In the meantime, I encourage you to listen to previous episodes that you may have missed. They're all available wherever you listen to your podcast, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on our YouTube channel at OurView for Life, OurView, the number 4, LIFE. And also make sure you're following us on social media. We are posting new content a few times a week on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The handle, as I just mentioned, is OurView for Life, OurView, the number 4, LIFE. I am planning on releasing brand new full episodes of the podcast starting in February 2022. So I thank you again for all of your support, and I can't wait to share all of this great content and all of the great guests that I have lined up for this season. And I just appreciate all of your support. So until next time. This concludes this episode of the OurView Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast or Spotify. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel where we post video versions of each episode. Make sure that you're following us on social media at OurView for Life. That's OurView, the number 4, LIFE. If you have any content ideas for podcast episodes or subject matters we should cover on our social media platforms, send us a DM or an email at OurViewForLife@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.